Hi, this is Tammy Blakemore. This is another episode of R and Friends. We're going to continue talking to Timothy Stewart, and Melanie Fuller is helping us out with this episode. We're going to talk about brands and brands responsibility. The next question is about brands and the responsibility brands have on, testing and their label and, everything they need to be responsible for. It is their name on the bottle, so they have a really, big part in to play with the supplement. And I know Melanie and I and even Dr. Tim, we're all passionate about brands. So Melanie, I'm going to let you kick it off on this topic.
Well, I think you kicked it off, but I just want to chime in here from a marketer standpoint is I'm very passionate about brands. And the reason why is, and when I define brands, it's brands, they don't have a manufacturing facility, but they have the heart, the passion, and the soul for good quality products that they know work from their own personal experience. And they've worked with a formulator to create a solid product. But unfortunately, what I've seen is these brands get exploited. Or the brands, they go and they find the least expensive manufacturer instead of the highest quality manufacturer, or just the person that's in the middle of the road. So I'm really curious to hear how you and Dr. Tim, your guys' expertise will protect these brands. I know from my heart and soul and being in the supplement industry how to protect brands. But for those brands that are out there that are on their own and they're searching for, some guardianship and some wisdom, I would like for you two to talk about how they could protect themselves, because a lot of brands don't think they're responsible for certain things, and that could be because other people are telling them this and they believe it because they don't know otherwise. So let's hear it from the experts, Miss Tammy and Dr. Tim.
I guess I'll start. I mean, whenever I'm talking to a brand, I'm trying to tell them to be strong and, this is their product and they need all the testing data. Like I'm always from the testing perspective, to make sure they have their batch record and, they know the raw materials, what the potency was of those going in, and then what their blend going out. And I also encourage them to get a quality agreement, like get an attorney, get a quality agreement. So everybody's on the same page of, it, what if the finished product doesn't pass? Do they still have to pay for that? Who's paying for the remanufacturing or, or redoing the label or any of that? But hey, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, well, you're definitely going down the right path. I mean, anytime you're taking the approach of, you're responsible for your own compliance, right? We can't contract out GMP compliance to other people. Now, how you achieve that is different for everyone. There's a little bit of kind of business savvy that has to go into play, and a well-established brand that's launching a new product, they're just adding to the catalog. They already are profitable. They would probably take a different route to achieve GMP compliance than someone that just came off of sort of a life event, and it required, there was they needed to make a change in their life or a loved one's life or something, and they were considering diet as one of those options. And they've had some good experiences, but then maybe they couldn't find exactly what they wanted to from a formulation standpoint or ingredients or things like this. And they decide that they want to try and launch a product that other people like them would also like. And so they might just get together with a few investors, or it's their own personal investment, and then they start off and they want to try and launch a brand. And I think they're going to have a very different approach than the well-established existing factory, but they're different, right? I mean, they're very different. You've got like one person that doesn't know a lot about the industry. They don't know a lot about labeling. They don't know a lot about sales, maybe even, and so obviously it's different than having a team and be well established, and you just, follow your written process for new product launches or something. I mean, may or may not be documented. And so, nothing should be off the table, but from my point of view, certainly sustainability is, and you want to do the most with the least amount of financial resources to achieve GMP compliance. And I see these brands, and you kind of say, look, what we do today and next year might be different than what you do before you go out on Shark Tank and you start looking for investors. There are certain vulnerabilities that you might be willing to run your first few years, even though, the GMPs don't differentiate between large business and small business and first product launch ever, brain or a little off, one-off hobby child. I only call it like hobby supplements or something like that.
Right.
I've heard this term with farming before. There's hobby farmers and then there's like farmers, and majority of them are hobby farmers when you talk to them.
Yes.
Hobby supplement stuff is where you just don't have unlimited resources, but you want to do the best you can. And so, that really is a great spot for someone to meet, like a lab like yours, that they are just sort of, they're sort of being told a little bit, they have a little bit of information, but then you're willing to sort of say, well, if it was my money, I think the testing I'd recommend is this and this and this, because this supports your label the most, right? And it doesn't mean total GMP compliance, but we know about 1/5 of all, well, I'm trying to think of the number, but I mean, best finished product testing comes up on probably 70% of all the 483s written for the dietary supplement industry, right? So it's a very common question to ask about finished product specifications, and then how did you ensure those specifications were met?
And I do think that the brand needs to make sure they've, checked their contract manufacturer. So that's not maybe every lot, or, it's whatever they define it as. But they're going to need to, have some kind of documentation that they've checked their contract manufacturer. They just didn't take their word for it every single time. They did some verification, and, have some testing on their side as well.
So Tammy and Dr. Tim, let's just run through this real quick as we can, for the sake of time. So there's a new brand coming out. Just say, I have a new brand, I'm coming out. Tammy, from a laboratory perspective, you would need to be involved first before, Dr. Tim would be involved if they needed regulation guidance, correct? So you would be involved first on the regulations, talking to them about how they're going to build their product, what they need. And then Tammy, you would come in and do the testing.
The R&D side is where it all needs to start. So,
yes,
it needs to start before they have a product. They qualify your raw materials, figure out, what your formulation is going to be. That's not me. That would be more of a Tim. But then testing all, at the very beginning, then you can figure out, unfortunately, with supplements and so many ingredients, there's a lot of interferences. So, we could have a whole conversation about interferences, but you figure all that out before it's actual ready to go on the market. Then there's, manufacturing testing and finished product testing, all along the way.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it really could come into play. Sometimes people, kind of start off with their own formula, and then their contract manufacturer sort of asks them to start doing testing, or they're going to need to do some, what testing should they do, but then they don't really tell them who, what, when, where. And then they might be on their own accord out looking for a testing laboratory that can help them do the testing. And I would say there isn't that many contract manufacturers that really specialize in probiotics, enzyme kind of testing in their own lab. They might have the capability to do a few things here or there, but probably not, a kitchen sink kind of probiotic formulation. You would go, the contract manufacturer may be able to blend it all, source it and blend it and make it, but the in-house testing would likely be contracted out to someone. And then that's where it says, well, do you want to send some of these strains out for identification and strength testing ahead of time before we start blending them? And then these are what we're going to test once it's in the blend. And that would be a conversation that it would be best to have before you've started doing the testing and before you've started mixing powders and things. And that could be where they might bring someone like me involved, or they bring someone like Tammy involved at that stage. it's always better the sooner, right? That everyone's sort of on the same page, but you can go back and deconstruct things and try and recompare things. But it certainly is nicer if you do it from the beginning with that in mind, and you kind of build it into the timeline and some of the costs as well. And it might change the formulation, even if you want to have 30 different strains and 2 of them are these one-off $5,000 a kilo kind of things, and they're hard to test for, and it's a trademark. You might go, well, how about we just do these 28 instead, because these few is that really, your marketing is around that. And you might reevaluate based on the costs and the formulation rechange things at that point when you start getting into the weeds. So to Tammy's point, like, you want them to be educated as much as possible, as early as possible, to be as efficient as possible. But life isn't always like that, and there's some things that you just have to, I don't want to call it retroactive, but you're trying to answer questions, so you're not creating bigger vulnerabilities that will likely catch up with you sooner in the future, right? You might have small vulnerability. You want to compartmentalize it and move forward as quick as possible, and not just stick your head in the sand and think it's going to get better with time.
Yeah. And I think that the other point to this is it's more like a team approach, where you've got the brand, you've got your contract manufacturer, you've got your maybe testing lab if you need a niche, specialty, or you need a third party. It could be an in-house lab. But anyway, it's a team, a formulator, a regulator. So the brand needs to be thinking about who's on their team, and figuring out their build their team for their brand and for these product launches. But, like Tim said, we do a lot of retroactive. People have got this already being, maybe being sold, and then they're like, oh, but it's not meeting claim, and we're having to go backwards, which, it happens. But I just try to educate like the right order to do things, how to do it the correct way, and then maybe save somebody some time just by, getting it set up correctly. Hello again. That was a great episode. Thanks for listening. I'm glad we learned a lot about brands and brand compliance. Until next time, we'll talk to you soon.